Welcome back to the West Ham Voice on this Monday afternoon. I promised in this morning show that I'd do a quick update at my views on the Karren Brady TalkSport interview that was held on Sunday morning. For any of you that haven't heard it, do look up TalkSport and see if you can find the interview. Um, Not sure how much of it you'll enjoy, but I'll give you my views on it. First of all, such a shame that both the hosts, Sean Custis and Henry Winter, seem to be more overawed and in awe of the fact that Brady even appeared on their show. They didn't ask anything that was probing. There was a light touch on many of the subjects that we believe are quite controversial. And Custis and Winter didn't really do the job of really interrogating Baroness Brady for the questions that they asked her. And I'm surprised more by Winter because he's usually known to be quite a forthright journalist, and he hardly spoke throughout the whole interview. Now, the questions were obviously given to Karren Brady in advance, as usual. Brady's responses were standard. We've come to expect that, and evident that she was not going to be caught out by anything controversial. She knew what was coming, and she had plenty of time to script her responses. But what about the answers to some of the questions that were asked? Well, I'm going to go through some of the salient points that were raised. First, they talked about the American tour. And Brady stated how important it was to be part of that, what the Premier League are doing to reach out to our American audience. And she was honest and said that outside the UK, the American market is the second biggest in terms of fan base for West Ham fans. Now, I've got a feeling that Brady would have been out there pushing hard to impress potential American investors into West Ham. And don't be surprised if over the coming year or so, we hear of Americans possibly buying into West Ham United and buying out the Gold's sharehold that is still available for sale. Now, Brady, then they talked about the manager, about Graham Potter, and she bigged up his management style, about there being a great team spirit that he's created. Yet in the first game of the season, there has been now, after just one game, there's been talk about disagreements behind the scenes. And after the Sunderland game, apparently the police were called into the changing room. Now, let's be fair. I don't actually believe that happened, but there is certainly not the happiness and harmony that she's been suggesting that there should be or that there is. Now, Potter's team selection and subs must have left several players bemused. And now we hear that Alvarez, with his recent comment on social media, is on his way out. Apparently, Turkish club Fenerbahce are looking to buy him, and it won't surprise me if that deal is going to be done within the next couple of days. But I digress. I'll go back to the Brady interview. Brady suggested that the club definitely want to keep Lucas Paquetá and that it seems the player himself is happy to remain. I guess proof will be in what happens between now and the remaining 2 weeks of this transfer window. I think Paquetá will probably stay, but for a very different reason to the ones that have been bandied around already. You see, next summer, the board are going to need a player to sell that's going to bring in big money. Now, this summer sale has obviously been Kudus and what's looking like Alvarez. And next summer, the players that will fetch a big reward to West Ham United are two, Bowen and Paquetá. The board won't want to sell Bowen, and then that falls on Paquetá to sell. They don't want to sell Paquetá this year because we won't have a big player to sell next summer. And we will use what we'll do next summer is we'll use the option to extend his contract by an additional year so that he will still have 2 years left on his contract this time next summer. And then we'll look to sell him for what, 50, 55 million pounds, something like that. Anyway, Brady spoke about the need to sell Mohamed Kudus. It was always on the cards, let's be honest. She tried to make out that because of his form falling away, that we had no choice but to sell him. But we knew he wasn't happy. We knew that he wasn't fitting into Potter's plans, and we knew it was damage limitation. But it's better for Brady to have suggested that because he wasn't good last season, it made it easier for us to sell him. Well, we play Spurs next month, and the last thing I want is for Mohamed Kudus to prove us all wrong that his form had fallen. Look, his form had fallen away, but it was a disgruntled player. Look, Brady's right. We had no choice but to sell him. But to suggest that it's because of his form falling away was a little bit arrogant of her. And then, of course, she banged on about PSR, PSR playing a vital role in setting Mohamed Kudus. And at the point where that's the point where I would have expected Custis or Winter to have probed her on why the club are in the financial situation that we're in, given that we've moved stadium and apparently was meant to be better, much better managed, etc. And then I would have expected them to ask questions about why we've just taken out all these massive loans and what was the reasoning behind that. But not a word. The conversation then moved on to Graham Potter, and as expected, Brady was not going to be critical of the man that she ensured came in to replace Lopetegui. Brady went on to suggest that West Ham have always backed their managers and that they tend to stick with managers at this club. Well, the reality is there for all to see. In the 108-year history up to 2010, we had 12 managers. That's averaging a manager every 9 years. Since they took over, 2010, we have had 7 managers, of which one has had 2 spells in the 15 years that they've been in charge. That averages to 1 manager roughly every 2 years. So it's hardly backing managers, I'd say. And if things aren't going to go well with Potter by Christmas, then I think his job will be on the line as well. Brady was asked if we need to improve the squad, especially in midfield where there's a lack of pace. And her response was simple. Everyone can see that we're lacking in midfield and the club are working hard on this. Well, let's now see if the board do exactly that. And let's now see if we're going to get the players in that we need in order to make our season better, especially in midfield. Now, Brady banged on about how competitive the Premier League is and that it's not all about spending money. Well, isn't it? I would worry how much of or how little money we actually spend. If we had a proper infrastructure in place for bringing through academy players, then I wouldn't mind not spending money. But Brady also didn't really talk about how much money we've wasted in transfers over the years. It was a light touch on that, and the way she talked about it was as if it had nothing to do with the board. She seemed to suggest that the board have been blameless in the total waste of money in player purchases and player sales over the years. Now, I have said we have spent money. We have, but we've never, but I've also maintained that we've never spent money wisely. And a proper director of football would have managed that situation. And again, Custis and Winter didn't challenge her on that. Brady was asked whether the board was looking to sell, and the answer was an emphatic no. And as mentioned, only the shares available at the moment through the Gold family are available. And as mentioned, I think she was on a charm offensive when she was over in America. And let's see if that doesn't materialize into maybe American investment over the coming months, maybe over the coming year. Then her disillusionment of suggesting that we would be a very sought-after club for any prospective buyer. Really? With a stadium that's not ours, a stadium that's not fit for purpose, a squad that's been mismanaged both on and off the pitch, and a disillusioned fan base, what exactly is there that we're being sought after? Because we've got London on our shirt, on our badge? Maybe that's it. And then the first of what I would say was a controversial part of her interview. She emphasized the importance of fans at home at the London Stadium. The arrogance of her suggesting that fans don't seem to understand how an important role they play at the stadium. What an insult, Miss Brady. We know exactly how important our role is at this club. And yet the club does everything in its power to make us feel like strangers, that we don't belong, for a club that we've grown up to love. Every year it feels as if we're having to fight the club for some improvements or to maintain our status quo, and there is no togetherness between the board and the fan base, despite Karren Brady seeming to suggest that we're all in it together. Now, whether it's the stadium atmosphere or the standing area that we don't have, or the family area that we don't have, or whether we should or shouldn't have concession tickets, it always seems to be an uphill struggle for fans to be treated with any level of respect from this current board. And yet, Brady seems to suggest that we're not playing our part when we go to watch the team at the London Stadium, and that every stadium is the same when we're winning. Every stadium around the country is the same. If we're winning, everything is fine. And if we're not, then it's not fine. The arrogance, the total and utter arrogance. You know, her lack of understanding of how football fans operate and how football fans feel is clearly astonishing. She's so far removed from what real fans really feel. Now, had Brady and the board had delivered what was promised, a world-class stadium with a world-class team, then perhaps we'd be an awful lot happier, us minions who spend a hell of a lot of money going to that stadium, going to games away like I do, going to Europe, that when we were in Europe for 3 years, the sheer amount of money that we spend, and yet she thinks that we're not grateful and that we should be playing a bigger role to support this team. How dare her? Brady was asked if we could have achieved everything that we would achieved if we'd stayed at Upton Park, and she faltered here. You could tell that she wasn't quite convinced with her own answer, suggesting that the stadium move has been a massive success, and that we have 35,000 families coming to watch West Ham. Have we? Have we really? Well, if West Ham had their way over concession tickets, there'd be nowhere near 35,000 fans coming to watch the team play. There'd be 35,000 tourists coming to watch. Brady banged on about how the move to the London Stadium has been a success, how it's allowed us to invest in improving the squad. Yet here we are 10 years down the line where we're pleading poverty and having to sell before we buy. Again, Custis and Winter didn't challenge her on that. And then again, why we're in such financial constraints, and why we're borrowing huge sums of money over the past years from Barclays and that group, that funding group. If it was such a success, why are we in such a dire financial situation? And on the day that we heard about Alvarez, as I've said, about to be sold to Fenerbahce, so that we can further fund players coming in, it's obvious that the stadium move has not been a success and has not improved our squad. Brady suggested, well, you could be successful at a smaller ground, maybe. And then she realized Bournemouth. How many have they got? 11,000 capacity or whatever it is, who are doing very well. Thank you very much. She tripped over herself when she mentioned Bournemouth, because it proved that you did not have to move to a bigger stadium to be any more successful. If we were in Champions League, if we were winning trophies on a regular basis, then I think every West Ham fan will turn around and applaud her and go, what a fantastic move that was. But that hasn't been the case. We've had 3 good years in Europe. We did win a trophy, but that aside, as I've already asked many times before, couldn't we have achieved that if we'd have stayed at Upton Park? I think we could. It proves that we didn't have to move from the Boleyn. This was a monumental balls up, and it's not improved the football team, and instead it's held us back, if anything. Her disillusionment continued when she suggested that the stadium was ready built. Yes, of course it was ready built, but not for football, Karren Brady. She then praised herself. Self-praise is no praise. Remember that, people. She then praised herself for the standards that she set in football when she was at Birmingham City. Yet they left the club in disarray, almost in ruins. And yet she banged on about how the club itself was in ruins before they took over. Overall, Karren Brady has no remorse in what she and the board have done at West Ham United in the 15 years that they've been in charge, or however long it is. She has taken no responsibility for the poor mismanagement of managers and managers who have mismanaged teams, poor mismanagement of players and player purchases, player sales, etc. She truly believes the fan base don't back the team at home, and truly believes that the move to the London Stadium has been a resounding success. This, people, is why West Ham United, as many fans keep saying, will not progress to that next level whilst Karren Brady and David Sullivan are still at the club, believing that they're doing such a great job. Join me for the West Ham Weekly later tonight. Thank you for watching and listening. If you want to become a subscriber and a member of the channel, click on the link that's scrolling along the bottom of the screen. I'll see you all later.